It's the 25th of July 2018, and I am certainly not the only person Googling this David Bowie lyric at 3:45 p.m. I'll put it on now. Listen while I write. When I perform this in a few months' time, I'll be able to conjure the moment. I like the idea that I'm speaking to my future self, now speaking to you. About an hour ago, the world was told that a lake bed has been found on Mars' south polar ice cap. I was sitting on the floor looking at Lucy Skaer's Sticks and Stones when my phone vibrated with the notification. It sounds like a gimmick, too good to be true, but I'm telling you, it's the truth. A gallery assistant can testify. I received the news that a lake exists on Mars while looking at a series of otherworldly objects shaped in the form of wood dredged from a riverbed. Life's funny.
Lucy, Agnes here. I saw you carting in 2 bits of manky wood the other day. They looked a bit wet. Got something in mind for them? If not, Simon from Cats Protection League is looking for stilts. For himself, not the cats. Well, what would he do? He'd cut them to smaller lengths. Not the cats, the stilts. Then how would he attach them? No, forget it. Never mind. Just try and keep them away from the vegan anti-slip Attenborough rug. And if you come across my toothbrush, give me a shout. It has sentimental value. But only the head end with the bristles, not the stick. I couldn't care less about that bit. Agnes.
I'm conscious of my double, Katie. I wonder what she will have thought about the work. I know she's seen it already. I wonder if she's also had the idea of framing it around David Bowie's life on Mars. Maybe. Maybe she'll do something clever with the lyric in the song about the sunken dream. I've seen Katie speak before. I know that she will look for detail. I think she'll tell you about the weight of time, the power of materiality and its relation to representation. I've only met Katie twice, but she's one of those people that you feel an instant connection with. The first time I met her, I asked her for a pint to look cool. I know that Katie and I have a shared love, the story, and the sense of touch involved in the in-between as a narrative passes from hand to hand. It's odd to sit writing, thinking about what Katie will be doing. I'm not allowed to speak to her during this process, and I long for her. I long to hear what Katie will say, if not only so that I can do the opposite. It didn't feel right to do a traditional art history essay. It's odd to know that I'll be speaking this out loud.
1. Like sinker mahogany, Burmese blackwood, tin, coins, lithographic stone, azure ceramic, copper, American walnut, tiger's eye, carnelian. Parallel skew, the ancient lumber slumbers, chromosomally spooning on the open floor. On one, bark flecks and crunches along its borders. I follow the seasons etched out in the grainy, desiccating reach of growth crackling into heel skin. Trace the epidural endurance of altitudes, washes, stunted lumps. The other chunk is peeled smooth, incised, cut mid-breath and open there, vacated and imminent, a nutty, soft, oval core, a ripening tide bisected. Sure, there are lines, hinges, and tactical features staking and pinning them into inadequate tenses. They would have made upright piano lids for upright times. Another, they could have granted the wishes of the coins sunk gummily into their side, returning everything to its metal hood at last, at least. They should have been something on which to play their mineral notation, motivation, clarification, action. But unforming and obstinate, they mutely glyph, solid and silent. Nothing stops the blue tile being blue, a coating of toenails, polish and worn feet. Off-white and slotted into curved corners is a square that is a Nicorette patch pumping. What gets into these skins? What gets out?
Appearing like finds from an archaeological dig, the first sculptural pairing is made from Belizean mahogany. 2 twin rectangular forms which resemble one another but are not identical are embedded with objects rescued from the artist's former studio in New York when she moved to Glasgow. Over time, the mahogany has been translated into 8 different materials, each permutation devised from the previous casting without reference to the original or the intermediaries. Lying low on the ground, the forms speak to one another, but also speak to themselves. Like DNA strands, the couples suggest touch, the possibility of contact, and a hidden knowledge stored within their form.
Series of sculptures examines artistic legacy of inherited flaws. A series of twin sculptures, each replicated from a previous pair, seeks to explore the relationships between objects and between those who create them. Sticks and Stones by Lucy Skaer, on show at the University of Edinburgh's Talbot Rice Gallery, charts the successive recreation of a pair of objects in various materials. The display is based around 2 lengths of wood recovered from a river, which have been embedded with objects from the artist's former studio.
Hey, Lucy. How's it going? We keep missing each other. I swear I can hear you working on that new piece of yours you keep hiding under that tarpaulin. It's the sticks, isn't it? Anyway, just a quick note to thank you for the tea bags you left me last week. Wasn't sure I'd like meat infusion tea, but hey, I was wrong. At least I hope they were tea bags and not just some old beef stuffed into some organza bags. By the way, I seem to have misplaced my Roland Rat reading glasses and my John the Baptist nasal hair trimmer somewhere in the studio. If you come across them, leave them on the pile of deconing books by the soda stream and the taxidermy hens. Regards, Agnes.
I wonder if Katie and I were to be made from these materials, which ones would be? Ceramic, marble, aluminium, paper. If I were to be one of the sculptural pairs, I'd want to be the one made from woods that are traditionally used to make instruments. I like the implied sense of sound, the potential symphony held in its squashed form, but the simplicity of its appearance.
1. Galleon. 2 voices translated from the debris of a washed-up galleon, smashed against the laments of an errant armada. 2 voices, one gruff, a shanty, bitten by its time at sea, one smooth to glass or polished bronze, where a statue has been touched by luck. 2 voices logged long ago, one encrusted with wreckage, one dug hollow as if by a melon baller or ice cream scoop. 2 voices hacked from the hulls mid-breath and transplanted here, studded with alien textures, solid, silent, fistfuls of ocean still stubbornly stuck to the bottom, remains cleaved into 2 voices, disguised all that they were and wanted to be. Voices fading into the quicksands, slowly eroding, dissolving under their own surface. 2 tightly woven voices, one a wishing well, the rattle of change glinting in the deep, the other salvation, other night, its stars projected, embedded, a singular moment. 2 voices dragged here by horse, voices exposed by their skin-picked anxieties, consumed and reconfigured, one as blue as Burmese blackwood, one more copper than tin, as ever-present as tiger's eye.
This wooden pair has been recreated in terracotta, which in turn have been produced in marble, and the process repeated a further 6 times. Each pair of sculptures has been created by a different artist, each of whom had access only to the most recently made pair.
2. Like ceramic. Copycats, newly born and cured in pink clay. This is the turn of tiles. They brittly resist their glossy stacks of terracotta. I want them to clatter into cascading fringes. A flapper version of Lady Gaga's meat dress on a rooftop. I want to hear it. A multitude trying to obey and disobey, fitting and unfitting. Substitutions have occurred. Shapes blister from the red tile where the stones once lay, but the blue tile persists such punctuation. The stake still crosses a hinge, but the hinge is lost in the cuts. The coins are gone, submerged into viscous unison. There is persistence and difference, and still they do not touch, ossified. They are undone inside, and they do not touch outside. Maybe they touch the light instead, and the oh la la of the patch left raw, unshining, unmade up, au naturel, and woke up this way, yawns wider than a dressing table mirror that gives no reflection, only dust. The Nicorette patch is cleaner.
2. Pot bank. We sort through the seconds, the spoils, the breakages from the first biscuit firing, tiles still warm from the kiln like baked potatoes, the dunts and thermal cracks discarded. Each tile similar, but never the same, tessellating snugly yet imperfectly, the crackle glaze, the crystal glaze, spread over the naked earthenware, the porous surface ready to adhere. Glazed to a mirror shine, a bright red blood moon and terracotta blues, lacquer with the lustre of an oil spill. The permanence of dust embedded in our hair, ingrained in our nights, slip and slurry raging through our veins like blood, bones cast from fine bone china in the city of 6 towns. Any shape we boast can be thrown. We cluster together, imperfect and penniless, voices shaped by broken promises, voices growing closer but never close enough to feed each other's blaze.
I wonder what the artist would want me to say.
Artists involved in the display suggest that the sculptures might be perceived by an onlooker as mirroring pairs of chromosomes found in DNA, or seen as suggestive of human relationships, with successive pairs echoing generations of families and their inherited flaws.
Lucy, it's Agnes. No luck with the glasses this end. What about down your end? No worries, I'll pick some up at Home Bargains. They do 2 for $3.99. By the way, the de Kooning books, did you borrow them? I had a quick look in the toilet, thought you might have taken them in for a wee read if you catch my drift. But no, you must have seen them. They were next to the slow cooker and the Kes Lego set balanced on top of that remote-controlled armadillo. That's not mine, by the way. Anyway, I hope to catch up soon. Let me know if you see or hear anything. P.S. The slow cooker will switch off by itself, but the armadillo won't. It's charged to the max, and the on-off switch is Mullered. Agnes.
3. Like blue Savoy marble, malachite. Looking cleansed of all topographic distraction, this copy-coup usurps the original, solidifying essence of gaseous platonic form. Eons of crystalline streaks compressed to grace this slab to be chopped, carved, and sharpened into following the ruler rules. This is the part of the sequence when a shape becomes a type, but this one, this too, wants to be the real deal. Verdant gems adorn this purest form of third copy. The next line, after the perfect rhyme, uttered by gods who live on clouds, this colour and morning's this pale. But when I see it, a block is missing, left out in a case by the wall, packed up in polystyrene to be jigsawed into place.
3. The Savoy, 1894. Post-shift, the stragglers ushered out, the kitchen cleared down, Ritz and Escoffier propped up against the bulk of the grill room's marble bar are on their 3rd round. Jocular and garrulous in French, Ritz circles the finger around the rim of a coupe filled with cognac and champagne. Escoffier is blazed, slurping a concoction of bright chartreuse and lush with absinthe. Like 2 slabs of meat on a butcher's block, they drink to a coup de grace or cri de coeur while a barman cleans around them, disinfecting the slab with hot soapy water so the marble glistens, its speckled mineral veins blinking under the electric lights.
4. Like aluminium, bronze. Aluminium, gunmetal. Metal is always copying light. Is that why we were always copying in metal? There is something uncanny about natural objects cast into metal. Only we can do it. Anthropocentrically trapping the world in zombie seizures. Is that because we can see our face in the surface? The crack in the casting, the ceiling daylight, the smudge of our figures peering over the places it fails to yield back to us?
4. Ships and coffins. These are the most human of all the objects, like 2 iPhone 5Ss charging on the kitchen counter, or the age-old Anglo-American argument on how to pronounce aluminium. A bird's-eye view of 2 battleships, not yet scuttled by guesses of F1 or J8. 2 lead-lined coffins. The metallic deadness has the tranquility of a perfectly still mill pond. Your face ripples in the high polished shine.
Hey, Lucy. It's been a couple of weeks since we bumped into each other. I was hoping to have a chat about my stuff. I'd get you to call me on my mobile, but I can't find that either, or my Shed 7 golf clubs. Not that the two are necessarily mutually dependent in any way, but the clubs were signed by the drummer. In pen. Speak soon, Agnes.
Any errors or omissions made during the replication process may be reproduced in the subsequent pair, exploring the nature of when flaws become part of an accurate reproduction. The final installation details the 8 completed pairs in materials ranging from wood to aluminium.
5. Like maple, oak, piranha pine, yew, Douglas fir, cedar of Lebanon. And so you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. Love is like an astronaut. It comes back, but is never the same.
5. The forest. As the raw materials begin to dwindle, I look for answers in the arboretum, where I guess at the species and stroll beneath the great canopy. Felled declarations of survival against gravity's undeniable magnetism. I mutate, she mutates, they mutate. The air is rich with our shed selves. Each orbit brings something new and irreparable and unwanted. I am exhausted.
6. Like paper pulp. Concave, foamy fume of tissue, paper, books, receipts, travel tickets, flyers, posters, toilet paper, CD covers, old library cards, biscuit boxes, fire exit instructions, sticky notes, bookmarks, maps, exams, codes, laws, voting slips, birthday cards, letters, timetables and postcards, drifting icebergs off from the line.
6. Papier-mâché. 1. Memories of wrapping scraps of soaked newspaper around a balloon to fashion versions of parents, grandparents, sister, other sister, self. 2. The contents of an upturned handbag. The paper debris rains down, evidence of consumption, proxies for the time that slipped away. 3. Recycled, reconstituted, resurrected, reincarnated, pulped and moulded into egg boxes.
Hey, Lucy. So, Christmas came and went. I hope you had a better time than I did. Remember those presents I had delivered to the studio from Amazon? Gone. Vanished. So I'm in the family doghouse. Such a pity. Dad would have loved that all-weather reversible moth costume with the flashing LED antennae and the harp that I got along to go with it. And poor Mother, I think she was expecting the pneumatic drill with the 9 attachments, including the Pam Ayres artisan bread maker, flamethrower, and the classic pirate hook number 3. She said it was fine, but I could see she was raging. Andrew was very understanding. Once we talked him down from the monument, that is. I said I would get him the inflatable time team Tony Robinson and the needy monkey for his birthday instead. But I think overall it was Sam who was the most visibly disappointed. And to be honest, who could blame her? I'd let slip early doors about the 10 tons of zebra dung, a massive box of the wrong size clogs, and that bottle of mildly disturbing goose dreams that she'd asked for, none of which I had in my possession. She had real tears in her eyes, which I could have wiped away if I hadn't lost the personalised handkerchiefs, blessed by none other than Formula One's David Coulthard, which I'd left in the studio. And by the presents next to the life-size cardboard cutout of John Sessions buying a used Hyundai from the Bathgate branch of Arnold Clark circa 1989, and the original framed oil painting of a nude mule standing in a bin, or it could be male, the handwriting is a bit shaky, by the botanist and TV personality, David Bellamy. I thought I was buying a John Bellamy. I'm a bad sister, not for supporting the artistic aspirations of David Bellamy, rather the fact that I've come home from the holidays empty-handed. Anyway, see you at New Year, and if you find any of my stuff, leave me a note. Agnes.
Recently, I've been reading about the idea that women should relate to one another without using men as their opposite for comparison, and I think this shaped my initial impression of the work, the impression before the text came through about the lake on Mars. The coastal edges of the forms made me think of where my grandma used to live in the northeast of Scotland. Holding her velveteen hand, jumping from rock to rock, her telling me stories about my family, our history. She taught me to write. My handwriting is modelled on hers, or the specific form of vowels that she learnt in calligraphy class. My mother taught me to speak. She told me to stand up, speak up, and say what I mean. When I public speak, I hear her voice. Everyone says that it's kind of freaky how similar we are. I think it's comforting.
Kate Keohane, an art historian at the University of St Andrews who took part in the Sticks and Stones project, said, "Over time, the mahogany has been translated into 8 different materials. Each permutation is devised from the previous casting, without reference to the original or the intermediaries. To me, the sculptures speak of the way experiences imprint upon us as people, and in the process become a kind of myth."
7. Like slate. The best form of the shapes and the purest form of unchalked dark. 8. Like. Is maybe, perhaps, might be, but could be unsure. Every rolled up variation in crack and scratch can't shake the symmetry. Next could be lino, cardboard, plasticine, jelly, fabric, meat, plastic, cake. How many to lose this chain and start anew?
Looking at Sticks and Stones, I wonder which casting I am. I wonder how many women before me have shaped the woman I am or the woman I am becoming. Each casting, echoing the flaws of the one before, metamorphosing.
Great slabs of slate like a wiped tab, a forgiven debt, or a fresh start on a blank canvas, or the roof under a blue sky thought, or the perfectly flat tributaries of the river Styx, or 2 black ghosts resting.
Tom Lyne, the taxman, or the teened to hell. I write these lines quickly before dusk falls. Tomorrow I'm 21, and I must go with my father, Tom Lyne, from this city to a small town on the banks of the river. He's a mystery to me, and recently stays too close. He says he has a debt to pay, yet it appears to me that he's a moderately rich man. I yearn to be free of his rule. Perhaps by that fresh water, I can find a fresh start, and we can finally be cleaved. Sometimes when I was a girl, I would look at my father and feel that something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on quite when the look in his eyes had smoothed to glass or polished bronze, or when his inky hands had grown so pale. I would watch him read his accounts or count his master's credit notes in careless abstraction, as though they were worthless scraps of soaked paper. Had something changed him? Sometimes I believed my father to be a mere spectre of the man I knew as a very young child, like those shadows cast upon the cloud beneath us when one day we had been walking upon the Eildon Hills. Had there been another father once? Or is this part of growing up? This irredeemable sense that the living present is not as self-sufficient as it claims to be, that I cannot count upon its solidity or density, which might one day betray me. It had been late when Tom Lyne, the taxman, arrived in the small town by the Tweed to collect the teen from the local craftsman. The pleasant gloaming was turning to gloom. The streets on the edge of town were skirted with tall rowan trees that whispered and shuddered as he passed, with his hands tight upon his leather pouch to fill with the tithe, the 10th part of other men's hard-won coins. Tom Lyne didn't care for the church that employed him, nor for the God that was said to be their capricious employer. He cared for his 14-year-old daughter and for order, for authority, and most of all for the coins that he counted. He was known to be cruel and impatient in his extractions. Many the house bound up by his liens, many the craftsman crippled in debts, the cost of the materials to be repaid when the goods were sold. At the woodsman's house where he went to collect his money, a strange wooden object lay prone upon the workshop floor. Though the woodsman urged him, Tom Lyne refused to touch it, for he did not care for the age of the rich wood and the sense that its ancient rings told a story he did not want to hear. To his shock, the woodsman refused to pay him. Tom Lyne was furious and told them that as the woodland belonged to his masters, then every plank was in their debt. But the woodsman shrugged and merely said, "Go see what my friend the potter says, for I know that when he burns the wood he buys for his kiln, it is he who owns the magic of the transforming fire, not me, nor your masters." When Tom Lyne reached the potter's house, the potter also refused. Tom Lyne raged, "My masters own the field where the clay is dug and the wood that fires your kiln." But the potter just laughed. When the fire heats the kiln, their blood-red clay becomes hard and strong, and I own that strength as sure as I own the strength in my own forearm. And Tom Lyne stormed out of the house. And in the yard, he could see tiles laid out in a strange pattern that seemed familiar. He would come back with the bailiffs and he would seize the tiles and the kiln. But first, he would go to see the stonemason. "I've come for the teen, that 1/10 part of the money you earned, making the fireplace for the laird and the fine grave of his beautiful wife," said Tom Lyne to the mason. "My masters own the ship that brings your Italian marble and the local quarry where the headstone was dug." "I will not pay," said the stonemason. He was working on a cold, hard sheet of stone that was white as a winter moon. "For your masters do not own the chill that means the meat stays fresh upon the slab." And when he spoke, Tom Lyne felt a chill that ran down his spine, as surely as it had been stroked by death itself. To warm himself, he went to the smiddy, where the hiss and the spark of the anvil didn't stop as the blacksmith spoke, and continued to work on a metal object just out of his view. "You can leave now with nothing," said the smith. "When I burn the wood I own, the very fire in the forge. And when the horse is shod, its steady gait is mine, not your master's." At the carpenter's, the air was thick with sawdust, volatile as though it might ignite, the squeal of the saw drowning Tom Lyne's claim that the wood was his master's property and a debt was owed. "I won't pay your masters," shouted the carpenter. "Whether I mend the church's joists or make a pulpit for their preaching, I hold their ideas aloft. They owe me, not the other way round." In the next house, the bookbinder eyed him with glassy indifference when Tom Lyne said, in a voice that now seemed weakened with shock, "My masters own the very tree that made your pulp." The bookbinder replied calmly, "I will not pay, for when the paper is wetted with ink, it's the author who owns his fiery words, not your masters." And when Tom Lyne caught a glimpse of the bookbinder's studio, he saw a pile of papers, damp and thick, as though each had been licked and laid upon the other. At the house of the roofer, the yard was ankle deep in black slate. It was a trick of the incoming dark, Tomline thought, that the shale seemed drawn in a shape that he now knew, as sure as he knew his own reflection. "I've come for the 10th part," said Tomline. But he was tired now, and he felt like he was drowning in the gathering darkness. "No," said the roofer, "there are no coins for you here. But my master's on the slate mine, and the horse that has dragged the stone here." "I owe you nothing," said the roofer, "for when I shut out the open sky, your masters do not own the warm, dry air in which my brothers shelter." And as he walked through the dusk, Tomline thought he heard the whispers of the craftsmen, their voices growing closer, but never close enough to understand. The 8th house lay in the last street of the town, next to the potter's field, where the clay had been dug so that the fallow earth was pocked with dark pits, as large as a man could lay in. And it was here that Tomline stopped, for he was too weak to walk. It was as though slip and slurry was raging through his veins, and then he gasped, for when he tried to speak, it seemed his very words were cracked and smashed. And suddenly, all around him were the craftsfolk of the town, and they were whispering Tomline's name until he was no longer sure who he was. Their words were slowly eroding and dissolving the solidity of his name and of his standing. "Tam Lane," the voices hissed. "Tamlin, Tambling, Tomlin, you are ours." And Tomline was helpless. "Come here, Tamaline, Tamlin. We are not the servants of your masters. Tamlin," they cried, "we are no longer your debtors. It is you who owe us." And with that, the tacksman knew that the craftspeople of the town held an ancient lien over his own flesh and blood. And he knew what the sticks and stones had meant. The stonemason's cool marble was his mortuary slab, and the potter's clay, the seal upon his unmarked tomb. The blacksmith's metal box was lead lining for his casket. The carpenter's handiwork, his final box. For the craftspeople of the town were of the good folk, and once every 7 years they had a far more important tax to pay than the 10th share to the clerical crows who had always reaped their labour. When darkness full fell, then Tomline fell also, and was dispatched to pay the fairy people's debt to the lords of hell. And from the gloom into the red moonlight stepped a fey man, as like Tomline as the taxman's own shadow. Which is, of course, to say, not quite alike, as though he occupied Tomline's shape, but had been crafted in new materials by different hands entirely. He put on Tomline's coat, mounted Tomline's horse, and headed back to the city, neither present nor absent, neither dead nor alive.
The case of Tomline, acting as trustee of Thomas Learmont and Derivative Publishing and others. The High Court of Erewhon, Intellectual Property Division. Tomline appeared in person in front of the court. Francis James Child appeared for the defendant. This is the judgment of Her Honour Judge Carter Haw, dated 14th September 2018. This is an action for infringement of copyright in a ballad called Tam Lin, a song involving a fairy queen and a nobleman.
The ballad is alleged to be owned by the estate of late Mr. Thomas Learmont, and the claim is brought by the trustee of the estate, Mr. Tom Lyne. The claimant alleges that the defendant number 1, Derivative Publishing, and defendant numbers 2 to 7, various creative practitioners employed by defendant number 1, reproduce a substantial part of Tam Lin in various works produced by them, and this is a result of unauthorized copying and derivation. The claimant seeks damages or an account of profits. The claim has a long history. Save for minor matters, the foregoing chronological summary of the key events is not in dispute. The claimant first wrote to defendant number 2, the screenwriter, alleging substantial similarity between her recently released film, Beauty and the Beast, and Tam Lin. The claimant demanded a licensing fee for the alleged copying, 10% of the money from the profits of worldwide release and distribution of the film. The screenwriter refused to pay, noting, "It is trite law that there is no copyright in the idea of a love story. For any further queries, please approach my co-worker, the playwright, who created the theatrical work from which my film is derived." The claimant wrote to defendant number 3, the playwright, raising an allegation of copyright infringement in his play, Season of Mists. On his allegation being refuted, the claimant asserted that the love story in Tam Lin belonged to the estate he represents, and every derivation of the story was in their debt. The playwright responded, "It is only the skill, effort, and judgment of the one who puts pen to paper that transforms an unprotectable idea of a love story between two different entities into protectable expression. I own my play and not your estate because it is my expression. For further queries, please approach my co-worker, the illustrator, whose graphic novel inspired my play." The claimant wrote to defendant number 4, the illustrator, demanding 10% of the profits earned from her graphic novel, A Night in Fairyland. The claimant asserted that his estate owns the characters of the nobleman and the fairy queen, and everyone who uses them must pay a licensing fee. However, the illustrator also refused to pay, arguing that the generic characters of a nobleman and a fairy queen constitute ideas which are relatively simple and abstract, and have been used in many creative works. She noted, "Please approach my co-workers, the composer and the librettist, who created the opera about a knight traversing the mystical realms, and the painter who brought the fairy to life on the walls of Newark Castle. Their works belong to them and not your estate. I admit I have been inspired by their works, but I have endowed my characters with unmistakable qualities and unique personalities, and the result in my graphic novel belongs to no one but me." The claimant then wrote to defendant numbers 5 and 6, the composer and the librettist of the opera, the earthly knight, who also jointly refuted the allegation of copying. They noted, "There is no monopoly in historical facts or long-standing myths. We will not pay, for when we collaborate and transform legends and epics into our operas, it is us, as co-authors, who own the fiery words and the rousing music and not your estate." The claimant finally wrote to defendant number 7, the painter, claiming that a painting, The Fairy Lost, was an unauthorized derivation of the fairy queen from Tam Lin. The painter retorted, "A graphic adaptation of a literary character described in a few lines without a visual description is a shift from one genre to another. Your estate should owe me royalties for bringing the fairy queen to life and not the other way around." Having met with no success in his correspondence, the claimant commenced the current proceedings. I now have before me applications by the defendants for summary judgment on the basis that the claimant has no real prospect of succeeding, and there is no compelling reason why the claim should be disposed at trial. Defendant numbers 2 to 7 contend that they owe no monies because they have not copied Tam Lin, and there are no similarities between the works concerned save at the most trivial and generalized level, and that any similarities as between the various works concerned have arisen by chance because they form the common stock of knowledge, myth, and folklore. Defendant number 1 denies persistent and willful infringement of copyright by its employees, defendant numbers 2 to 7, and argues that Mr. Tomline's claim is frivolous and vexatious. The first defendant, in its defense and a counterclaim, also contends that there is substantial similarity between Tam Lin and the story of Thomas the Rhymer, which is of unknown authorship and origin. Consequently, Tam Lin is itself a derivative work and lacks originality to attract copyright protection. Lord Hoffman's remark in the Supreme Court in Designers Guild against Russell Williams captures the purpose of copyright protection very clearly. Copyright law protects foxes better than hedgehogs. I have considered carefully all the concerned works. I conclude that any similarities between Tam Lin and the defendant's works are relatively simple, high-level ideas, and at the level of abstraction, there is no copyright protection. I find that the defendant's works may have been inspired by Tam Lin, but are not copied. I conclude the defendants did not copy Tam Lin, and the claim for copyright infringement is dismissed. The evidence available is not conclusive as to the relationship between Tam Lin and Thomas the Rhymer, and I will refrain from making any finding on the counterclaim. In any event, the determination of the counterclaim is not necessary in light of my finding on the claim. In these proceedings, the claimant has made a series of allegations in an attempt to monopolize the ideas in the Ballad of Tam Lin. The claimant's conduct suggests that he doesn't care for artistic norms around authorship and ownership and is driven by a cruel and calculative drive for extracting royalties to cripple artists in debt, by attempting to extract an unfair cost of the original ideas in derivative works that have become popular. In assessing costs with regard to the conduct of the parties, Mr. Tomline's conduct has been both strikingly unusual and, in my view, truly exceptional on the scale of unsatisfactory behavior. I believe that in the light of Mr. Tomline's conduct, in this action, taken as a whole, it is appropriate to reward £7,000 in costs to be paid to each of the defendants.
If I had to put this in an art historical context, I could talk about minimalism and the history of sculpture on the floor. We could talk about Robert Smithson's idea of ruins in reverse and a discourse of land art. We could talk about seriality and consider the work within a context of feminist artists making interventions in the gallery space.
Lucy, Happy New Year, by the way. I need help. I think I'm going mad. Remember the one-size-fits-all hidey-high cosplay outfit I bought from that monk off of eBay? The one that came with the genuine Welshman? It used to hang on the back of the door under the Emmerdale Farm bath robe. Worth a fortune now, by the way, because it was printed the week before they dropped the farm bit. But anyway, you must. Well, it's gone, and so is a Welshman, along with some of that plankton I was saving for my wedding. I've just counted. There's 4.6 billion missing. As if that wasn't enough, the Solowet boxing gloves have moved. I can't find them anywhere. They were only used once at that petting zoo. Come to think of it, everywhere I look, something that should be somewhere is gone. It's almost as if burglars have broken in and ransacked just my half of the studio. Lucy, I've made a list. This is on top of the other stuff that I've already mentioned. There's that set of 26 Scandi cat bowls, the 1920 magnetic monorail boots, my mother's indoor Anne Boleyn 10-pin bowling alley, that petrol-driven automatic will writer, the original instructions for Cluedo Under the Sea, 2 salted camels, a bronze casting of Cumbernauld, the Russell Grant and Russell Crowe dueling pedalos, 4 neighbouring ants fighting over a bun, an alabaster plastercaster of Louis Pasteur, 12 maids milking, Christopher Biggins's fishing equipment, though I might have popped in for that last week, my Bing lunchbox, that statue of Coldplay catching the bus, the fridge, Neil Oliver glove puppet with detachable hair, 4 cans of assorted lager, the Oliver Cromwell embossing set, and my shinty stick. That's shinty stick. I could go on. Now, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but you just didn't bag everything up after that fight over the classification of courgettes, is it a fruit, is it a veg, and dump it at the charity shop door. Anyway, I'd love to catch up sometime soon, perhaps when you've completed this new work. How are the sticks going, by the way? Miss you, Agnes.
Unearthed notes reveal mystery of vanishing items from art studio. A series of newly unearthed notes between two respected artists has revealed the mysterious disappearance of a range of eclectic items from their shared studio. Missing objects, including reading glasses, a harp, and a reversible moth costume with flashing lights, appear to vanish from the New York space the notes suggest. Artist Agnes Bagner wrote the notes over a number of months, revealing the extent of the lost haul. The letters, addressed to renowned artist Lucy Skaer, shed light into the anxieties felt upon realising that prized possessions, including Christmas gifts, continued to go missing. Amongst the missing items documented are almost 5 billion plankton, a Welshman, and a bathrobe commemorating the soap drama Emmerdale Farm, thought to be of considerable sentimental and monetary value. Other treasures, including fishing equipment belonging to the celebrated actor Christopher Biggins, are thought to be irreplaceable. The notes reveal that Lucy Skaer may have been working with pieces of wood during the time of disappearance, but little is known beyond this, as all of the notes discovered were penned by Bagner. In one note, she writes, "Everywhere I look, something that should be somewhere has gone missing. It's almost as if cat burglars have broken in and ransacked just my half of the studio." In the final note, the artist questions if her studio mate had donated the items to charity, following a heated disagreement about courgettes. Lucy Skaer was not available for comment.
8. Distortion. Like the uncertainty of whether the clothes hanging on the line are still damp or just cold, I can definitely maybe hear the Gallaghers in amongst the voices folded into themselves. Voices so homogeneous that the constituent identities, cardboard and cake, plasticine and meat, can barely be heard loudly enough to be distinguished. Cracked and smashed and fuzzed and ripped. But if I just hold still enough, perhaps I can recognise the original recording. With each replay, things get slightly more distorted, more corrupted.
Now I'm thinking about Bowie again, and I'm reminded about performativity, the possibility that I am all of these things and none, that this writing is overly constructed and contrived. And I'm thinking about the way the sculptures are impregnated with objects that are decorative and sculptural and ask questions about process. Sometimes they look like they hurt. Like, as the nursery rhyme suggests, bones have been broken. To me, they speak of the way experiences imprint upon us, and in the process become a kind of myth. Is there life on Mars? Perhaps, in my lifetime, I'll talk about the object dredged from a lake on the south pole of the faraway planet. Perhaps one day I'll tell a young woman about the 25th of July 2018. Perhaps this is my oral testimony. Perhaps this is my monument. I hope it falls.